Imagine for a second, right, that you're sitting in a dark movie theater.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You're watching this scene play out on screen. The characters are laughing, the sun is shining, and it's just this bright, perfectly happy afternoon.
Just a classic feel-good setup.
Exactly. But then the director wants to signal a shift. Like something deeper is about to happen. A secret is going to be shared. Or maybe this profound emotional realization is about to hit the main character.
And they don't just, change the dialogue to do that.
Right. They don't just change the script. They change the light. The scene fades from that bright, warm afternoon into this cool, shadowed, slightly mysterious evening.
Which instantly changes how you, sitting in the audience, actually feel.
It totally does. It tells you to pay attention.
Yeah.
Because the emotional stakes have just been raised.
It's a really classic cinematic technique, actually. We are deeply, psychologically wired to respond to that transition of light, moving from the safety of the day into the vulnerability of the night.
Welcome to our deep dive. Today, we're exploring a really comprehensive guide from the Weddizer ecosystem, and it's titled Blue Hour Magic.
It's a great read. It focuses entirely on how photographers capture those golden to twilight transitions.
Yeah, to create those incredibly moody, cinematic wedding images you see all over the place. So our mission for this deep dive is to basically extract the technical secrets and, well, the creative philosophy behind this super fleeting window of light.
We really want to equip you with the knowledge of how ordinary or even chaotic moments at an event are transformed into this extraordinary emotional art.
Because, in a way, shooting during Blue Hour is how photographers become real-life cinematic directors.
They really do. And look, while everyone loves a bright, sunny, perfectly smiling photo,
Oh, for sure.
and there's definitely a place for that, but true storytelling, the kind of imagery that makes you actually stop and stare, that often happens in the shadows.
In those cooler tones of Twilight.
Exactly. And it requires a completely different mindset than just shooting in broad daylight.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Because before we can capture this magic or even really appreciate it when we see it on our feeds, we have to define what we're actually talking about.
Right.
Because in the photography world, and honestly just on social media in general, everyone talks about the golden hour.
Oh, absolutely. It's the undisputed holy grail of lighting.
Right, that warm, glowing, sun-kissed look. So why on earth would a photographer willingly give up that universally loved sunlight for, cooler, darker tones?
What's really fascinating here is that it all comes down to the concept of balanced exposure. And really, the physics of the sky itself.
The physics.
Yeah, so blue hour occurs just before sunrise and shortly after sunset. And the crucial detail here is that the sun is physically below the horizon.
Oh, okay. So there is absolutely no direct sunlight hitting the subject at all.
None. During golden hour, the sun is low, which gives you that beautiful warm glow, but it still casts directional shadows.
Because the light is traveling in a straight line from one specific point.
Exactly. And those shadows can still be pretty harsh, depending on the exact angle of someone's face. But once that sun dips below the horizon, the Earth itself blocks the direct rays.
So where is the light coming from then?
The remaining light scatters through the upper atmosphere, so the entire dome of the sky basically acts as a giant soft reflector.
Wow.
The light becomes incredibly diffused. That's how you get these deep blue and purple tones with almost zero harsh shadows.
It's kind of like turning off a harsh theater spotlight and turning on a massive, soft, ambient room light that just wraps around everything evenly.
That is a perfect way to describe it. And here is why that specific atmospheric phenomena is the absolute secret weapon for weddings, or really any evening event.
Okay, lay it on me.
So golden hour is beautiful, Riz, but it completely overpowers artificial light.
Oh,
If a couple is standing in front of a venue draped in delicate fairy lights, or they're surrounded by hundreds of candles, the golden hour sun is still emitting so many photons that those artificial lights simply won't register on the camera sensor.
They'll just look like unlit, dead glass bulbs.
Exactly. Because the dynamic range is blown out, the sun is just too loud, visually speaking.
But during blue hour.
But during blue hour, the ambient natural light of the sky drops to a mathematical level that perfectly matches the brightness of those artificial fairy lights or candles.
So the exposure is basically 1-to-1.
It's exactly 1-to-1. Suddenly, the camera sensor can capture the rich, moody blue of the sky and the warm, intimate glow of a tiny candle in the exact same frame.
Without one washing out the other.
Exactly. It creates this painting-like image that is incredibly romantic and evokes a really deep feeling of calm and intimacy.
That's that cinematic aesthetic we talked about at the beginning. You get the cool twilight sky contrasting with the warm venue lights. It's the movie director trick in real life.
Totally.
But, reading through the Weddizer guide, it becomes immediately clear that actually pulling this off is a massive logistical sprint.
Oh, it's incredibly stressful.
Because the sun is constantly moving, meaning this perfect balance of ambient and artificial light is disappearing by the second.
Right. The transition window from golden hour to twilight is really, really short. Depending on your geographical location and the season, you're looking at a window of maybe 20 to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Maximum.
Let me push back on this a little bit, though. Is it really worth dragging a couple away from their own reception, stressing everyone out for a 20-minute window just for a slightly bluer sky?
Well,
Like, couldn't you just let them enjoy their dinner and fake this lighting in Photoshop nowadays?
look, an algorithm can easily replace a sky, sure, but it struggles immensely to replicate the organic physics of how ambient twilight wraps around human features.
Especially when you have complex lighting, right?
Exactly. When you're interacting with complex, practical lighting, like hundreds of tiny fairy lights reflecting in someone's eyes, faking it always leaves this weird, uncanny valley effect.
It just looks slightly off.
It does. To get the genuine cinematic feel, you really have to capture the real light, and that requires intense planning.
Which is where that Weddizer ecosystem becomes super vital.
Oh, absolutely. If you dig into the business and logistics sections on Weddizer, you'll find that professional photographers use dedicated planning workflows just for this.
Using weather apps and stuff?
Yeah, they use specific tools to track the exact minute of sunset based on very specific GPS coordinates.
Because blue hour isn't actually an hour, and it's not the same everywhere.
Right. Since it's dictated by the rotation of the Earth, your location changes the math entirely.
So if you're shooting a wedding in Iceland in the summer, the sun barely dips below the horizon, right? So your blue hour might stretch out for 2 solid hours. You have all the time in the world.
Ooh, Iceland is a dream for that.
Huh.
But if you're shooting a destination wedding in Costa Rica, closer to the equator, the sun drops like a stone.
You might have exactly 12 minutes of blue hour before you are standing in pitch black.
Exactly. The equator forces a vertical sunset, whereas closer to the poles, the sun sets at a shallow angle, which prolongs the twilight.
So photographers have to know this geographical data way beforehand.
They have to. The best practice outlined in the guide is to start shooting during the tail end of the golden hour and literally shoot through the transition into twilight.
You can't just show up when the sky is glue.
No, you have to scout your specific location earlier in the day. You need to know exactly where the couple will stand, where the artificial lights are, and what the background will look like when the sun drops.
Because if you're 10 minutes late to the location,
The sky goes black, the cinematic balance is lost, and the opportunity is literally gone forever.
this raises the stakes so high. I mean, imagine the speeches ran long, the dinner is delayed, Uncle Bob is lost at the bar somewhere, and you have 12 minutes to capture the most emotionally resonant photo of the couple's lives.
It really raises an important question about the psychological impact of that pressure. Like, does the time crunch ruin the moment or enhance it?
Oh, interesting. What do you think?
Well, from a behavioral standpoint, this intense deadline forces everyone involved, both the photographer and the couple, to be entirely present.
They don't have time to be distracted.
Right. They have to step away from the overwhelming sensory overload of the reception. They have to focus completely on each other and the camera.
So it's a severe logistical hurdle, but overcoming it produces an emotional reward.
An emotional reward that translates directly into the photograph. Yeah.
Mhm.
The intimacy you see in those shots is authentic because they are isolated in this fleeting pocket of time, fully aware that it's vanishing.
I love that perspective. It's almost like a forced mindfulness exercise disguised as a photo shoot.
That's a great way to put it.
But okay, let's say you successfully navigate the logistics. You are in the window. The sky is turning that gorgeous deep purple. Now, the photographer is racing the clock, meaning they cannot afford to be fumbling with dials on their camera.
No, they have to be ready.
We need to get into the technical weeds here, because capturing this is a massive battle against failing light.
It's a highly demanding technical environment because, the light is literally fading second by second. Your camera settings have to evolve constantly to compensate for the darkening sky.
Okay, let's unpack this exposure triangle specifically for blue hour. The guide gives us some hard numbers. First, your ISO, which dictates the camera sensor sensitivity to light.
Right.
In bright daylight, you shoot at a low ISO, like 100, for a super clean image. But in Blue Hour, the guide says you are pushing that ISO up to 400, 800, or even 1600 as the light drops.
And we really have to understand the physics of why pushing that ISO is dangerous.
Why is it dangerous?
Well, the sensor doesn't actually become more sensitive to light. Rather, the camera applies more electrical gain to the analog signal before converting it to digital.
Okay, so what does that actually mean in practice?
It's exactly like turning up the volume on a weak radio station. You hear the music louder, but you also amplify all the static.
Ah, okay. And in photography, that static is called noise or grain.
Exactly. So you need the ISO high enough to mathematically expose the image, but low enough to avoid it looking like a static-filled TV screen.
Got it. To compensate and keep that ISO manageable, you open up your aperture. The guide recommends f1.8 to f2.8 for portraits. So you are physically opening the iris of the lens as wide as it will go to gulp in whatever photons are left.
You're just pulling in as much light as possible.
And a beautiful byproduct of that wide aperture is that shallow depth of field, blurring the background and separating the subjects.
Which is crucial. Subject separation is so important when the background is getting dark and potentially a bit muddy.
And finally, we have shutter speed. Because you are starved for light, you have to leave the shutter open longer to soak up the ambient sky.
Right. The guide mentions dropping down to 1/60th of a second or even slower.
Which introduces a massive mechanical problem.
It really does.
There's a fundamental rule in photography regarding focal length and shutter speed. If you're shooting with an 85mm portrait lens, your shutter speed shouldn't drop below 1/85th of a second.
And at 1/60th of a second, every micro jitter of the human hand, even just the photographer's heartbeat or breathing, is magnified and transferred to the lens.
It guarantees a soft, blurry image.
Totally. At those speeds, a sturdy tripod ceases to be an optional accessory and becomes absolutely mandatory. You cannot handhold a camera at 1/60th in the cool twilight and expect crisp eyelashes.
That makes total sense. And beyond the exposure triangle, there is a hidden trap here that a lot of people completely miss: white balance.
Oh yes, this is huge.
If you leave your camera on auto white balance, its internal computer is going to look at all this heavy blue twilight and basically panic.
The camera's internal algorithm is programmed to neutralize color casts and make things look like neutral daylight.
So when it sees an overwhelmingly blue scene,
It assumes something is wrong with the lighting. It will automatically inject massive amounts of yellow and orange to, quote-unquote, fix the blue, completely destroying the moody twilight you're trying to capture.
so you have to override the computer.
You have to. You manually set the white balance to tungsten or dial the Kelvin scale down to around 3200. By doing this, you're explicitly telling the camera, hey, I expect the light to be very warm.
And in response, the camera shifts its color interpretation toward the cooler end of the spectrum.
Exactly. This preserves and actually enhances those deep, rich, natural blues of the sky.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The guide stresses one golden rule above all others for these settings. You must shoot in RAW format, not JPEG.
Non-negotiable.
Since we know we're dealing with immense dynamic range, the dark sky versus the bright venue lights, we need all the data we can get. I always like to visualize this using a bakery analogy.
Oh, the bakery analogy perfectly illustrates the data retention. Go ahead.
So, shooting in JPEG is like going to a bakery and buying a pre-baked cake. The camera's processor takes the image, bakes in the colors, the contrast, compresses the file to save space on the memory card, and hands you the final product.
Right.
If you want to change it later, you're just scraping frosting off a cake that's already baked. The structure is totally fixed.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do.
But shooting in RAW is like gathering the real ingredients: the flour, the sugar, the eggs. The camera captures every single photon of data from the sensor without altering or compressing it.
And when you're shooting in a high-contrast, rapidly changing environment like Blue Hour, holding on to those raw ingredients provides a vital safety net.
So if you mess up a bit,
Yeah, if that fading twilight sky was just a little too dark, a raw file holds enough hidden data in the shadows that you can bring it back to life during post-processing. A JPEG would have permanently deleted that shadow data to keep the file size small.
wow. But look, locking in the electrical game, the manual white balance, and the raw data doesn't guarantee a compelling image.
Not at all.
It just means you know how to operate the machine. Capturing the light is just physics, organizing it is art. How do photographers actually compose these shots in the dark to ensure they feel cinematic?
Well, the artistry really lies in construction, not just documentation. One of the most powerful techniques deployed during Blue Hour is the silhouette.
I love a good silhouette.
Right.